Hi everyone, I'm Trisha, and my world flipped upside down the day I found out what my brother was hiding. You see, growing up, he was all I had. I thought I knew him well until the day I found out the truth, and my life was changed forever. What about my parents, you might wonder? Well, our mom passed away when we were kids, and our dad only cared about himself. He was one of those wealthy businessmen who would do anything for money. So, after our mom passed away, Oliver took it upon himself to become my guardian. He is only 5 years older than me, but he is the closest thing I have to a parent. Oliver would walk me home from school every day, whether the sun was shining or the rain was falling. Basically, he was always there for me when I needed him. However, when it was time for him to actually go off to college, something changed. He wasn't the Oliver I know. He didn't want to go to college anymore, even though he always spoke about how excited he was to go. What changed his mind? He said it was because of our father. He wanted to get away from him and start a life of his own. At 19 years old, my brother was slowly walking away from everything that he wanted. By that time, I was used to Oliver not staying at the house anymore. He would pop through to see me and pick up some clothes. Even though it was his choice, he didn't seem happy at all. He always looked tired and like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. When I would ask him if he's okay, he'd just smile and nod, rubbing the top of my head before moving on. I thought about doing something nice for him, since I knew he was having a hard time. I went online on one of those websites I know he likes to purchase from, and I was scrolling through to find something that would fit my small budget. One of the seller's pages caught my attention. When I clicked on it, I couldn't believe it. It was Oliver. I ran to his room to confirm. I threw open the door and I was right. A lot of the things for sale used to be here in his room. But why? The next time I saw him, I asked about the missing items in his room. He patted me on the head and joked that they were packed up somewhere. I knew he wasn't telling me the truth, and it made me even more suspicious. I was worried about my brother, and he wasn't sharing anything with me. How could I know? At that moment, Oliver excused himself and went to the bathroom. I looked at the table, and his phone was there. I grabbed it without thinking twice. And yes, I know my brother's password. I started snooping around on his phone. I didn't feel right about doing it, but he was lying to me, and I wanted to know why. I went through his messages, and the last message was from a woman named Erica. The text said, "When will you be home?" What was even more bizarre was that this was the only message there. Was Oliver deleting this chat before coming here? My thoughts paused as I heard Oliver flushing the toilet. I had to think quick. Nothing on his phone was providing me with any answers. But then I got a great idea. I went to the location app to see the last place he was at. I quickly took a screenshot, sent it to my phone, and deleted the message. Oliver came back just after I put his phone back on the table. He kissed me on my forehead and said that he had to leave. It was investigation time. The next morning, I was determined to go to the location I found on my brother's phone. I took the bus, and the location led me to a rundown apartment complex. Could it be that Oliver lives here? I didn't know what to do there, so I stayed around for a while, but got bored. I was about to leave when I saw him coming out of one of the apartments. My jaw hung open to see that he had a baby in his arms. There was a woman that followed close behind. The woman locked the door, and they turned to walk down the stairs. I was so shocked that I couldn't move. It felt like the ground was spinning. Oliver walked down the last step and saw my stunned face, which I assume matched his own. Oliver sighed a long, tired, defeating sigh that said more than he could ever do. It was a sigh that said, "I knew this day would come eventually." Before I could talk, he walked over to me, with the woman not far behind, and immediately started the introductions.
Trisha, this is Oliver Jr., my son, and this is Erica, his mother.
I let the last bit of that statement wash over me. The mother of his child? The child in his arms? "It's nice to meet you." She held out her hand for me. I gave it a quick glance, then a light shake. Everything was happening so fast. I felt like my world was entering a black hole, and I didn't know my way out. "Your brother has told me a lot about you. He talks about you constantly," she said. Funny, because he never mentioned you. Oliver's head hung sadly, and I regretted the words I let slip. Why didn't you tell me? I was confused about the whole situation, and it wasn't getting better.
I'll tell you everything, Oliver interjected. But first, let's go back inside. I want to make sure that Junior's comfortable.
I looked at the sleeping bundle in his arms and nodded. Once we were inside, Erica took the baby and gave me and Oliver some space to talk. We had a long conversation that lasted into the night. Oliver apologized for not telling me about his secret. It was a complicated story. He had already told Dad about it, and the only reaction he got was rejection and disapproval. Oliver and Erica met at school, but her father is poor and they lived in hard conditions. Our dad was ashamed to have a grandson that comes from a poor and low-class family. So he forced Oliver to keep it a secret, as long as he supported him financially. At the time, Oliver had no other choice. He didn't make enough money to support a family, and he thought of it as a temporary solution until he could stand on his feet. He wanted to tell me, but he couldn't, and it was eating him up inside. I was overwhelmed by this information, but when I looked at my nephew, something moved in me. They even let me hold him. It was a moment I'll never forget. Since then, my brother and I developed a stronger relationship, and I was able to spend time with my nephew. I even agreed to babysit him from time to time. I promised myself that I'll be his big sister, the way Oliver was to me. But one day, when I was taking him for his usual walks at the shopping center, I saw Erica sitting at a bar. It was weird because she was supposed to be babysitting. What made it even weirder was the guy sitting across from her. I decided to head over, just to say hi, but both suddenly stood up. She smiled wide before giving him a long embrace. I was disgusted! Later that day, I waited for Oliver to get home. I explained to him everything I saw. Oliver looked confused, and he went to confront Erica.
What's going on?
He asked her. She looked shocked, and I explained what I saw. For a moment, there was silence. Erica sighed, and then went into her purse, pulling out an envelope, and then handed it to Oliver. He opened it and read silently. He then handed it to me. It was a college acceptance letter. I wanted to wait to tell you, but I guess I can't now. The man I met was an old friend of my dad. He works on the admission board of the local college. I have been trying to talk to him for a while, and he asked me to meet today to tell me the final results of your application that I filled in for you after I talked with him. You always take care of us, so this time I wanted to take care of you.
But, my brother started, what about you and Ollie?
She pointed to the bottom of the page, and Oliver read on. In accordance with your approved scholarships and grants, we will also provide student housing. She said it's a pretty small house, maybe even smaller than the one they lived in, but she was excited that Oliver will finally start to achieve one of his dreams. She smiled at him as she swiped through the phone, showing him pictures of the college and the house. Then he looked up, with unshed tears in his eyes. Oliver reached over and hugged her tightly, thanking her over and over. I was so ashamed at what I thought about her. I lowered my head and apologized to Erica for jumping to conclusions. She walked over to me and gave me a hug. I know you were just looking out for Oliver, and I'm happy he has someone like you in his life. I was overwhelmed by her kindness, sniffling softly on her shoulder. It seemed like karma was finally here for my brother. By the time the new semester comes around, Oliver would be in school. His family would be close by, and his nosy sister would help them as much as she can.